Hi, and welcome back. This is episode 12 of the Sacred Nectar podcast. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to continue on this little journey of exploration where we take deep walks through the mind garden of our guests and myself, your host. Today's episode is sharing with some beautiful souls. So join and let's dive in. I am super excited to be sharing with Maryn and Margo of Indie Birth today. And they have been on my radar for, maybe 8 years now, maybe more. And I am really excited to have them sharing with us today about the Indie Birth journey that they've been on together and what Indie Birth is up to as of late. So I found you guys, like I said, probably 10 or 12 years ago now. It's been a while.
Oh, wow.
And I found you when you were super new, and I had consumed all of your podcasts. And there were no more to listen to. And so you fell off my radar, like completely, because I was like, well, there's no more podcasts to keep up with. And I just like, it wasn't the time of like super media everywhere. So I just dropped you guys out. And then my last pregnancy and birth, I had a friend mention you all to me, and she's like, have you heard of Indie Birth? And I said, I think so. And then she said, yeah, it's Maryn and Margo. And I was like, that sounds familiar. And then I looked you guys up and I was like, yes, I love these people. I can't believe I forgot they existed. And so I hopped back on your email list, and I've been there and just been so excited about the journey that Indie Birth is taking right now in this major transformative time and space. And both of you all, too, have been going through your own bit of transformations, which is really super exciting because that always means evolution. And so, I am just really happy to have you guys here to share about the Indie Birth story and the direction that you guys are going with your work in the birth world. So, I would love for you guys to just open. Either one of you can go first. It doesn't matter to me, but just share about the first beginnings of Indie Birth, like how that came to be.
I suppose that's me, because there was a time when Indie Birth predated Margo, which is hard to believe. But it did, because I was once a student midwife, and Indie Birth was my project as a student to feel like I had some degree of independence from working under a midwife. And so Indie Birth was started as a print magazine, a little tiny zine in Flagstaff, Arizona. And it was just a way, again, to have my own thing, to put some of my own creativity into the world. And that version included different articles about birth that other people had written, that I had written, ads for local services. And then eventually it became a website. And it really just started as natural birth stories, which is funny to think back on, back in the days when the internet was so simple in a way. And it was just like natural birth. It really wasn't more specific than that. And then, of course, I met Margo, and we began our journey together, essentially as midwives, and just started to explore these deeper, important levels and layers of autonomy and freedom, and I don't know, things that I never really imagined talking about. But being in midwifery just started to expose so many of these lies. It wasn't just natural birth or not. The politics of midwifery and licensing, all of these things became really important to me. They were already important to Margo, which was something I was so grateful for. And the long version, of course, is in our book. I always recommend our book, Indie Birth, A Story of Radical Birth Love. You can get it on Amazon. It tells the long story of my separation, essentially, from mainstream midwifery, licensed midwifery, giving my license back to the state of Arizona. And I don't know about you, Margo, but I feel like, that's kind of like the pinnacle point at which things had to shift fundamentally for Indie Birth to really become something different, to become something more than birth stories. So that was a huge shift. And I feel like since then, yeah, we've just been together on this ride up and down personally and, with Indie Birth herself as we become even more clear now. And that's, that was 12, almost 13 years ago, even more clear now on who we are and why we're here. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, as you're saying all that, I had this image, and I don't know that I've ever had it before, but it's sort of like, and maybe it's because we were talking about geodes the other day, but it's like, when I came along, you already were on this path with the Indie Birth stuff, and I kind of got to join in, and I think fundamentally we had a lot of these same values and ideas already at that point, but it's like we keep like digging down. It's like we're like getting to this like jewel. What is it? What's the Om Mani Padme Hum? I'm gonna butcher it, right? Like the jewel in the lotus, right? Like I feel like we're like getting there year by year, and as like we clear more away, and even like with our school, which we'll probably talk about, our midwifery school, looking at the course content as we're sort of imagining new directions there, and being like, actually, even us in 2016, like we were pretty rad still then. It's just like we're refining and clarifying as time goes on. So yeah, the Indie Birth journey has been really cool, and I also think it's been predestined all along. It's just like a matter of excavation or something as we go.
Yeah, it's actually, like, from my perspective, super, super enjoyable and beautiful to see the transformations that are taking place. But I just realized in the last month or so that you have more than one media outlet. So you do the Taking Back Birth podcast, and you also have like a Rumble chat that you do, correct? Or is that part of it?
The Taking Back Birth podcast is my podcast.
Yes.
Margo also has her own podcast called Midwifery for the People. And then
Okay.
the Rumble is like a video. It's like a, YouTube equivalent
Okay.
show over on Rumble.
Yeah.
With both of us.
With
Yes.
both of us, yeah.
Yes. So I just recently heard you all share on the Rumble talk about sovereign birth and all the hype and whatnot about that word and what it means and all this stuff in the world right now. I mean, it's been going on for the last 5 or 10 years, but like Maryn knows, it's been much older than that, of a way of being and living. And as you guys shared, in your talk. But that is such a pivotal piece of the birth story from my perspective, is women knowing the full autonomy of their being and of their decisions in the realm of birth. And that is one of the reasons that I so enjoy the work that you guys do. And that specifically, like present day, I feel like the path that the midwifery school is taking is exactly along those lines of both enabling birth keepers, people who are attending to birth, to be honoring of that, as well as helping the mothers who are in the birthing position to, be in their full power and autonomy through the process. And so, yeah, I would love for you to then jump into, Maryn or Margo, either one of you, what is happening with the Indie Birth Midwifery School? How is it transitioning into a more, let me say, metaphysical or spiritual, experiential work, as opposed to a very physical, material based and work that it has been or whatnot? Yeah.
We are in the middle of that for sure. So I feel like the seeds were planted for that way back when we started the school. And from the very beginning, I feel like we had this desire to, as we say, balance the science with the sacred. So it's not a new thing, but I do think it's partly the state of the world and, just feeling like this new earth coming and following that. So it's not like it doesn't feel like a conscious choice. It just feels like if we're following where we need to go, then this is it. And I know, at least for me in my own life, that's been really reflected in my experiences in the last 2 years, where it's like, we can't keep doing what we're doing in all the ways that it's not serving us. And so while the school is this really beautiful creation, it has started to feel, like it needs more than how we have had it. And funny, of course, when I feel like we are following that, then it just sort of starts to happen too. So, intellectually, we've been like, all right, this needs to happen. And how are we going to do it? And when is this going to happen? And then the universe, has delivered its own way. So what was it, last week?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, with the click of a button, I totally take responsibility for deleting our midwifery school, which is not what it's, I mean, it is tragic, and it's also hilarious and funny. And it was, I take responsibility, but it wasn't my fault at the same time. Like, that's not supposed to happen when you did what I was trying to do, which of course was not intentionally to delete the school. So it was tragic and made
part
us
of you.
I know, right? Part of me maybe, but yeah, it wasn't super intentional. Anyway, the point being the obvious, right? The universe was like, well, if you guys aren't gonna do it soon, we're just gonna do this. And anybody that's a student, if they're listening, they know we're taking care of this. They're gonna have their courses. It's all gonna be okay for the people that are already in and running with the school materials. So that's really graceful, because it could have been much worse. However, obviously, it's this huge opportunity that we are being given to say, well, how is this going to go from now, from little things to are we going to move everything to a different location course wise and things like that. But yeah, to me, it was really a great thing. I don't know that you agree on some level, Margo, but
No, I do.
it needed to happen. It needed to happen. And it's just the funny way things happen for us.
Totally. No, it's hilarious. And we resolved it very quickly. There's a few small issues still, but everything is back up and running. Well, and I've been saying for a long time, as because we've been having these conversations for at least a year. I keep being oh, it would just feel really good to have a fresh start, which also is very reflective of my own personal journey at the moment. I have a very fresh start, fresher than I maybe wanted. And, yeah, so, I guess just backing up a little bit for people who don't know, we started the school in 2016. Is that right? I'm always was it 2016 or and it kind of came out of a series of conferences we had, in-person conferences, which I do see in our future. Maryn had a dream about one recently. Hopefully that was okay for me to say, Maryn, outing your dream. But yeah, I think those will be a thing again. But the first few that we did sort of built into this fervor where people were like, yeah, we want a midwifery school. When are you going to make one? And so we made one, and it was very intentional and fun and creative. And we included all kinds of really cool things that most midwifery schools do not, our students have to read Women Who Run with the Wolves. And we have a whole course at the end called Metaphysical Midwifery, incorporating different modalities and tools. And again, the sacred and the science, both. And so we did that from day one. But I think, again, 2016 started the school. And then, of course, some really weird stuff has happened in the last few years collectively as humans. So that plus our personal lives in our own like growth and evolution. Like we've been adding, new language and new tools and new modalities ourselves, and have changed the way that both of us show up as midwives and in the birth space. And so it only makes sense then that the school, which is really an extension of ourselves in many ways, needs to do the same. And so, as part of that, sort of a peek behind the curtains here, like as part of that process, as we especially were rebuilding these courses, we were looking through them, and it's like, actually, most of this is still really, really good. This is really aligned. It's beautiful. Like the projects are cool. You can always improve upon things, right? But, there's a lot of really amazing meat and potatoes there already. We just have some new things, new perspectives, new stories, and again, new tools and modalities to kind of be weaving in, and to be just sort of changing the ratio a little bit. It's not like we're eliminating the science. We're not like getting rid of, like, people are still going to need to read Anne Fry until somebody writes a better book. Like, sorry, everyone. But, but just beefing up the spiritual, the metaphysical. That's not even the word I'm looking for, though. The sovereignty piece and the autonomy piece and the self-responsibility piece for the students themselves even more. Because I think what you were saying right before this was like, I'm not sure if this is what you meant, but what I was hearing or what I was wanting to share afterwards was like, we're coming at both sides. Like we started as people who were educating moms. Like that was our first thing, was we made a birth course online before that was really a thing. Like we were sort of pioneers in that space. But just as much as women that are having babies need this sort of infusion of like self-confidence and self-responsibility, so too do the midwives or whoever is showing up in the birth space. It's like you can't have one without the other, or it gets really imbalanced.
Yes, I really appreciate Maryn sharing the the DL on the school and its expansive process that is unfolding. So fresh of an experience for you all, and yes, I do see that happening with, like you're saying, Margo, with the school bringing in these elements, both elements. And I did, when you still had the 13 Moons childbirth course, or like childbirth prep course, I did partake of that. And it was my favorite. I thought it was very informative and very, very helpful, and had, like you said, a lot of meat and potatoes of really important pieces and elements that I couldn't find elsewhere. I mean, I've also been to Free Birth Society's offerings, and they just don't have the same offering at all. And so I was a little sad when you took the 13 Moons away, but I know that it's part of this like evolutionary rebirthing of the indie birth that's taking place. And it is just like Maryn has said, it is just what's happening with the cosmos and the world and everything. And it is just all filtering down into these little pieces, like the piece of indie birth and the pieces of, your individual lives and so forth. So it's really, it's actually very beautiful to witness the unfolding of all that is happening in the world, though it doesn't always feel like happy. It's a bit tumultuous at times. It is still very reassuring, the direction and the path of things. So yeah, I'm excited for the fresh start of the Indie Birth Midwifery School that is happening and being kind of muddled through at the time. Like right now. So yeah. So, Margo, you touched on it a little bit, and you may or may not want to share, and that's okay. But you said you've been going through your own transformations, and I know that Maryn also has as well. So if you guys would like to talk about that, we can, because I feel like they are, like you said, just in the indie birth story itself, the piece about you each navigating your own relationship with your licensing as a midwife is a huge piece of, the indie birth story. And I feel like, though we haven't seen, like 20 years down the road, I feel like the things that you are each navigating right now is also a huge part of indie birth's future. So anyway, I would just love for you either one to jump in and share about your transformations. Maybe Margo, you go first since you open that box a little bit.
Sure. And I will say too, just that we will have a different childbirth ed offering, a even better version.
Yes.
Very soon.
Yes. Yes.
It will be back. So don't worry. Do not fear. Yeah. Where to start? I mean, I think the way that I think that it would make sense to tie it in is that I started practicing midwifery, which is kind of a gross word, but for whatever, I'll say that anyways. For the sake of simplicity, I started my midwifery practice in Minnesota in 2017. Is that right? 2016, end of 2016, 2017. And had a really, sort of fulfilled my dream of being a midwife in a community and doing the radical midwife thing. I was unlicensed. I never had a license, just to be clear. I also never did the CPM thing, despite kind of like going most of the way down that path and then kind of deciding at the end that I wasn't gonna. So I was living the dream and was as busy as I wanted to be. And then I had another baby, and then COVID happened, and that was weird, right? For everybody. And so I was in the middle of nowhere on a farm with this, baby, or not really a baby at that point. He was 1, and COVID was happening. And I had an experience at a birth where a baby died. And so that was very much a pivotal moment for me in my, like, who I am as a midwife experience. And sort of, I think, was the thing that turned me, like, changed the course a little bit. And so that's a little bit of the backstory, like living the dream, had this experience happen like amidst the COVID and having a 1-year-old and being in the middle of like a not great marriage relationship at that time. We weren't actually married. That's a long story. But long story short, I took some time off after about a year after that to sort of really try to integrate and process, like, how do I want to go forward as a midwife, which felt like it was really hard to do in the midst of still seeing people. And so I took a break, and then the break kind of just like extended when I realized I was also needing to end my relationship or make space for the possibility of that. And so I didn't know how that would look being on call if I was now separated or divorced. So yeah, this break happened. And then the breakup happened, and a lot unfolded that was sort of not expected as far as that went. And so I had to come to the conclusion of like, and then I had some clients. I actually kind of went back on call, had clients, had a full, like, a lot of repeats last fall in 2023 that I ended up having to just tell, like, I can't do this, after trying a few births in this new configuration of being a single mom. I just didn't have the right level of support. And so what I want to say about all of that, because, like, who cares about my life, right? But the way that it weaves into the indie birth thing and midwifery in general is like, it just highlighted how not sustainable the way that we're doing it is, how, like, it's not doable unless you have this very specific set of things in place, which most people either don't have or could lose at any moment. And so it just really brought that to light for me. And so it just added on to the pile of like, man, there's a lot wrong with how we're doing this. And so at the moment, I'm on indefinite hiatus taking clients until something shifts there for me. So that was a lot and not very linear. So hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, I feel like this is actually a really, really important piece, though. And you mentioned, like, nobody cares about the details, but I think this is actually a really important piece, is that we are lacking the support for basic, like, needs in our world. And being able to care for a birthing mother takes a whole lot more than maybe is understood by the majority of the population.
Yeah.
It's like you said, it needs a lot of support, not just from the mother's perspective, but from the support team around as well, like per se the midwife or even the father or the partner, or whoever is there. This is a huge network that is supporting this really sacred space. And I think when we start to like have a vision of this and an understanding of this in our world, then I feel like a lot of things will change for the better. But it
Yeah.
it's so much related to just the understanding of the sacredness of birth, and that piece in and of itself, I think, would lead to then the support, but just an honoring and a respect for like how incredibly of a like deeply reverent space the birth energy is or should be, makes that so obvious that there needs to be a lot more support. And so I
Yeah.
love that you stepped back and that you are in your own evolution of honoring that, knowing that you can't do that little piece the way it was and the way your life is set up right now. And I think that's really important. So
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because I feel like it's made it so I could more clearly articulate it too. It's like, I think for me, what became clear when that one piece got taken out, which was my ex, it was like, to say I lost it again. I guess just like this, how just like weirdly compartmentalized it all has become. And it's like this lack of a village for the
yes,
midwife, but also for the mother, and how like the return to the village is what we would actually need
right.
for all of this to shift and be different. And this ties into the story of like the baby that died, and like how, in a village setting, like this would all be handled so differently. There'd be support for her, there'd be support for me, there would be, grief, there would be ceremony, there would be all of it. And without that, it just feels very precarious to be attending births. And so I'm really grateful that I got to do it for as many years as I did in the way that I did it. And it was very clear, like, now when I do it again, because I know I'm going to do it again, like, it's going to have to look different. And it's going to have to, I'm at least going to have to attempt to build this other, network around me and around my clients, so that it doesn't feel so like, oh, I'm on the midwife island out here. And it's just real weird.
Yeah. And that's a real thing. The midwife island is a real thing. Even if you have other midwives in the area, they may not be supporting you. They might just show up to the midwife dinner or something like that, but that's about it. And so sometimes you are, especially in your position where you weren't licensed, a lot of licensed midwives or people who are, considered midwives by the majority of the public won't even participate with people like that in some states and in some areas of the country. They just won't work with them. And so, yeah, I think I thank you for sharing your journey. And I think it is a huge piece, like I said, of the direction that indie birth itself is going. And, Maryn, I believe, if I'm right, you did at some point have a sort of village model or a sanctuary of some sort back here in the contingent 50 states. Is that correct or no?
Okay, so Margo and I both have this vision of, we call the Indie Birth Sanctuary, and that's probably what you're referring to.
Yes, yes.
And yeah, it's the real dream, and that has not manifested yet at this point.
Okay. So it's still on the vision board. Okay. I for some reason thought it had an actual location at one point, but I guess it did not yet. So I'm really excited for when it does have an actual location, because I think it will be a model for what needs to spring up all over the planet. So and I love that, yeah, I love that you guys are doing this work, because without the work, this little bit of work that's, being done now, the future isn't going to have its network. Like, you are building the network now, and I think that that's really, really important, to remember, as sometimes your days feel futile and Like you never achieve anything. I know as a mother, it feels like that a lot. So, yeah, Maryn, I would love to hear about your journey off to Hawaii because you are now living on one of the islands with your entirely beautiful family, which is exciting that all of everybody moved with you. No one decided to stay, which I mean, you have grown ones now, so that's kind of crazy, but also really beautiful. It goes to, it's like a testament of the energy that lives in your household, I think. So, yeah.
That's mostly true. My almost 20-year-old son did stay in Arizona, but he's actually here right now. He's here for 6 weeks. And yeah, I think he would totally live here and maybe will one day, but right now he's still there. But yeah, I don't know where to start and how to make it a concise story. But Margo and I traveled here to Oahu 2 Januaries ago at this point. And I had a dream, which sounds so cliche, but I had a dream. We were supposed to come here and we were supposed to teach. So we did. And when I got home, I just knew that I wanted to come back and be here with my family. And so we had that planned. It took a bunch of months to work out, but we had the plans to come here last summer. And then I had a similar experience to Margo, which, I feel like we've never talked about together on a show or podcast. And that's a really good idea. Because we're best friends. Like, how could our lives not mirror each other and our work, in these deeper ways? So it wasn't exactly the same story, of course. They're also different. And the gist of it is it was a difficult, very unexpectedly difficult birth. Just one of those that you never saw coming. And the baby did survive through some grace of his own accord, I'm sure. But the parents became like demons, honestly. I don't know if I ever will get over it because I don't really understand how you could treat another human that way, especially one that actually saved your baby's life. So, yeah, it was really difficult to experience that. I had never experienced that before. And, there were other layers and levels to it. There was a doctor friend involved, and he pretty much wasn't supportive and disappeared. And it just felt like the classic witch hunt. It just felt like the classic, oh, the midwife gets blamed. Even when there's other people involved, the person that actually, came through with what was needed, skills and otherwise, is the one we're going to hang. So it felt very old woundish. And I knew I had been there before in other lives as well, even in the same scenario where there was a doctor and there was me and I could feel it all. So we went to Hawaii. And again, that was already planned. So for people that were like, oh, she ran away and there were all these rumors and whatever. And I was like, no, actually, the universe just totally paved the way for me to get the fuck out of there because I really needed to. And yeah, that it just totally changed my life in so many ways, some similar to Margo, I think. And I think we both had to sort of experience these things for sure to be able to redream what this thing called midwifery is, because it's not working. I just agree 100%. It's not sustainable. I didn't really have any support. It was very graceful. Nothing terrible happened, but I was also unlicensed. I mean, I just marvel at the fact that it happened as smoothly as it did, because again, just reliving those old wounds it was potent, it felt just really, really difficult. So I can't go in all the ways that changed me or my perspective, but I too have taken a break. I did attend one birth last January for just a really beautiful, easy woman and her family here on Oahu. And I'm still so grateful to her. I still talk to her. We're still connected. And it was just what I needed at that time, to remember the things that I know, that I'm supposed to be in that space, and that it's usually really beautiful and that babies have their desire. And I think that's the other piece that has come in really strong. And I also just had a miscarriage. So all of these things have kind of converged to address a lot of like the spirituality too, with life and death and the choices that souls make and what our role actually is in that. And I think until I really lived it, there was a piece of me, just the ego piece that would have said, um, when I hear of other stories, maybe where a baby didn't make it, it's like, oh, well, what else could have been done or what happened? And I still think those are valid questions, but I'm asking less of them these days, because I think we either choose to believe that each soul has the choices it's going to make in this life, whether that's whatever, or we don't. And, that also extends into miscarriage and a lot of the feelings of blame and shame that I think are very much out there by other women. And again, I feel like I was maybe in that camp at one point. It's like, oh, what could have? And it's like, we're here now. There's so many lessons that we've learned in the past, but yet we're here now to create this reality where like there isn't regret and there isn't like this old shadow around the way things could have been. So anyway, that's really long-winded, but like that spiritual piece I think is still working on me, and I'm sure will continue to, right, for so long, like my whole life. But a lot of good things came through, and so I'm ultimately grateful for that experience. I don't like those people. I will never like them. But I also just sort of see them as like a product of the society we live in, where people say they want one thing and then it turns out that they don't, or, it's not what they expect. So I don't know how I'll go back to doing this. I think the sanctuary is a huge piece for me. I don't know that I'm wanting to go out there on my own again. And it's not from a fear perspective. I think the final piece that I'll share, take a breath, is I realized in that break just how much work I needed to do on myself and the nervous system repair that I needed. And again, just looking at sort of our average midwife, how bad it really is for the body, the mind, and the spirit to work in the ways that they are, even though they're doing great work and, they're serving women. We're not going to last. We're not going to last. This role, this archetype we've built up in this way is not sustainable again. So doing that work on myself has brought me to like new areas of interest, like somatic experiencing. So wanting to go further with some of those things. And so, it's all been a gift. It's just been difficult, as life can be.
Yes. I thank you for sharing that story. I feel like it's so important to, like you're saying, like really look at this piece of how unsustainable what we have been doing is, whether that's the medical model or midwifery. Either, both, the way we have been handling childbirth as a society is not sustainable. And I have just a personal share. Have always had interest in midwifery, and about a year and a half ago was approached by another woman to share her birth journey with me. She wanted to have a unmedicalized birth and whatnot, and through the experience of tending to her in her birth, I just realized, like, so firsthand, how incredibly important it is for that support, like we were saying with Margo's story, for that support to be there for not just the midwife, but the mother and her whole space, which is why the village model is so needed. It is so necessary. And I think what you chose to do, and kind of probably what just organically unfolded, Maryn, through your experience of this birth and the after story, was this break to like stop, decompress, and process what you had experienced. Was is also what needs to be happening collectively with birth, is like this, like stepping back and taking a break and realizing like the models that we have currently aren't working, they're not sustainable, and we need to break. We need to like you said, get back into our bodies, shake off all of that things that do not serve us, and come back more centered, more clear about how we want to proceed with birth. And so, like I said, I really feel like that's part of what's unfolding for indie birth, and I'm super, super excited about that. But yes, something that you touched on, Maryn, is such a vital piece, and that is the souls that are coming through do indeed have their own plan and purpose. And I think that is something that is oftentimes forgotten and even overlooked within the birth world, is that things might get blamed on so and so or this person or the mom or whatever. But even like miscarriages, like these are things that are, let's just say, preordained, cosmically divined before and beyond our understanding. They are not things that we fully at this point in humanity know how to grapple with. But I think the easiest thing for us to collectively start doing is, like you said, we are here now. And that means that we, in this experience, get to be as we are, and nobody needs to blame this person or this process or that agenda or whatever else. It's about us being in our center and taking full power over what we can do, and the rest releasing, because not everything is up to us, like so egotistical to think we can divine and ordain all these little tiny pieces that just cannot be divined and ordained by us. They're far beyond. And I think that's a huge piece.
Above our pay grade.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I haven't released this episode yet of my podcast. I don't know if I'm going to. I need to. Well, I will, but in some form or another. But I recently recorded one about my trip to Ecuador when I was going to go do some volunteer work at a birth center. And that was sort of like the root of wanting to go. It was like I wanted to see what birth could look like from a different cultural perspective, like how a shift in that would shift the physiology and experience for women and for midwives. It didn't quite pan out, which is the short version of the story. But I think that's actually a really interesting thing to take away, is like, wow, like this is pervasive, this fear, the blame model, the just like rejection of death, and like it's in so many places. Like I don't know that we could find a nook and cranny in the world where it hasn't reached.
Sadly.
So I think that, that's felt like, oh wow, that's the work. And like Maryn's gotten really interested in the somatic experiencing, and I've kind of traveled down the internal family systems rabbit hole and how to work with people, specifically women going into birth and also birth workers, around those pieces inside themselves, where it's like, where's the part inside of yourself that's blaming you for the way that birth went?
Yes.
Like working with midwives in that way, or with moms being like, as they're approaching birth, like what are the parts of you that are really excited about this home birth, and like acknowledging that there might be parts that aren't. So yeah, I think there's just so much work for us all to do collectively that some days it feels very overwhelming.
Yeah.
But yeah. And Maryn, you said something about like the break not being from attending births, not being, from a place of fear. And I just wanted to like highlight that, because I think it's important. It's really like out of love, for ourselves, and like the need for it to look different, for it to be good for us as well as for women. Because I also think it's not good for women to have midwives showing up like totally frazzled in like flight or fight. Like that's probably not good for anybody. And so it's like, I think those are the moments where it's like, oh man, what are we going to do here? But I think that's the cool part about the spirit of indie birth, is like, it really is about taking it down to the studs and being like, now what? Instead of what I think most midwifery is doing right now, which is like, how do we make this like 0.5% better, even if it means that I also get cancer?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's not worth it. It's just not.
Right.
And, I think it goes back to just a little bit of the piece of the souls that are coming through have their own story that they are unfolding. Yes, we are part of it and they are part of our story, but they are also unfolding their own way. And, I've had 2 births, and my births that I've gone into, I've, communicated with my little ones and explained, like, this is what mama has planned for your birth, but I also trust you to have the birth that you want. And thankfully they've aligned, but that doesn't always happen. That doesn't always happen. And so I think understanding this piece as midwives and as mothers, um, that being in the birth space is like just such a gift, and to almost just be witness to it as opposed to feeling like we can monopolize or change or, even sometimes contribute in any way is almost silly, because it is an organic unfolding. Like, all we can do is like witness and support really to the unfolding that is happening. I mean, yes, there are other things that happen, but I think that piece is really important, because without it, so much of the sacredness of birth then is lost, because we want to put our little hands here and there and do this and that, and it doesn't better anything. It just complicates it. And it sounds like, Maryn, your story, while you were doing the story of that created a need for a break in your life from midwifery, it feels like the parents, didn't understand that piece. They didn't understand the element of the divine unfolding of it all. And I think, yeah, like, such a miracle that you were there and saved their offspring is just so precious. But to underestimate that and invalidate that for any woman in the role of nurturing in the space of birth is a major disservice to the world. Yeah. On a small scale and large scale. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we are probably all of us and probably people listening just waiting for the world to catch up in a lot of ways, right? So we can only do what we can do inside of ourselves, and people will catch up or they won't. But until the world shifts enough, until women, families begin to understand that piece of sovereignty. And as you were speaking, Ahava, there is that sovereignty of the soul. So it's just like this irony that we want to talk about our own bodily autonomy, but then, there is no autonomy for that third being, because things do happen. And I think the truth is, we never know anything. But I think with a lot of the people that I've worked with, Margo, that you've worked with, you don't really know how they're going to take it until you're in that. And that's a risk that we were taking every single day. And that's like shocking to me. It's like,
It's
I
huge.
need to, yeah, like,
Yeah.
as much as I can know anything, like, I have to know going forward that the people that I'm working with are ahead of their time as well. So, I just say, I don't know when I'll go back to attending births. It's going to have to feel like the right thing. It's going to have to be the, absolute right person in front of me. And even that's a risk that we take, because we can't quite know where someone is at fully. We're not them. So, gracefully, most births are what they should be to bring another person here, right? But anyway, it's like these weird outliers. And I do think it's more than a coincidence that we both had these experiences, as experienced midwives. I mean, I had never had that happen. I've never had anything even close to that happen. Not that babies haven't wound up needing some help or needed NICU care, but in reflecting on a lot of those families over the years, they were always really appreciative, and it was something we felt like we were in together. We all wanted the best to happen. So anyway, it was a shocking wake up call that exists in the world still. And I don't know that we'll keep it from existing, but it's like a better plan in place, in a sense, whatever that means. But I don't even know. There's really, what plan is there, right?
Yeah. I think for me, beginning, like, as I step back and look at this, disassociated view of birth that we are in right now. I feel like the place to start, at least this is how I see it, is at conception. When we start to understand the importance of just that piece all the way through the pregnancy, then when the sacred space of the birth, when the full time is ripened, right? And it's time for that birth, that at that point, because of the like leaning into the conception being important and leaning into the pregnancy being important, at that point, the mother, the father, the people who are invested in that child coming through are so fully surrendered to what is going to take place that they just go into that liminal space of the birth realm with the mother and lean into that. And that's how I see, personally, as the thing that is the most important piece that we have societally been missing, is this full spectrum. Because it's like Margo pointed out, we're not in touch with the reality of death. We're not in touch with the reality of birth. And we're certainly not connected to the reality of what conception is either. And I think when we bring this piece of conception being so important and precious, and that's something that you all talked about in 13 Moons too, is like this little piece, honoring it and then fully leaning into the pregnancy so that when the full time comes, you are fully surrendered to this process in your being. It's an alchemization that is happening through those 9 months, and it should be an alchemization that's happening with the village, the mother, the father, their support team, the midwife, whomever is going to be present. I see it as a full spectrum that we have yet to, pick up and carry an understanding of.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like a complete spiritual revolution, and like that's where, and trust me, it's pretty infrequent that I feel this way, but like yesterday I saw like on a Facebook group, like a mom's group I'm in, somebody posted the question, what do you all think about getting the epidural shot? Was how like she worded it. I was just like, what? Like, doesn't even know what she's asking. Like, I have compassion and I don't want to like make fun of people for being like completely ignorant. But, there's moments where I'm just like, when I'm thinking of like someone who's consciously conceived and like done all this beautiful work and like is here in the birth and like has this great birth, like that person and like that person, the should I get an epidural shot person, like how are we both in the same species?
Yes.
Like, there's just such a rift and like such a huge, it feels like a large distance that we're like hoping people leave. But also, I know there are a lot of people who are ready for it. And like you said, Maryn, it's like finding the people who are ahead of their time.
Yes.
And who are ready to take that on and be some of like the people to alter the way they approach this all. Because it's really only been a few generations probably where it's been so broken. Not that it was, I don't want to romanticize, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, because I'm sure there are other problems for sure. But, it's like, at least our connection to like the earth and each other was there in a different way. And it just, it feels like that's the project, which is the other reason it feels really okay to be stepping from birth, because it's like, the people who've got it, they've got it. Like, they're going to be fine, or they'll find another midwife or whatever. It's like this larger project feels like it would take many lifetimes, right? Where it's like, how do we help people like wake up spiritually and like become embodied?
Yes.
When like, we're talking about like conscious conception, when another thread was like, I had my tubes tied and I think I might be pregnant. Like, what's happening? Like, people just like so disconnected from their bodies and like cutting parts of themselves out and off. And it's just like, whoa. Like, there's on the one hand, it's really like, there's also so much room for improvement. So it's like, that's kind of fun in some ways.
Yes.
I don't know.
There is so much room for improvement. There is so much room for people becoming awakened and aware to the truth of their being and what it means to be in a human vessel. I mean, I think that's like the greatest honor and the greatest privilege that we could have. And understanding that is, I feel like, one of the key elements to getting women to this understanding of what the birth realm is and why it is so sacred. Maryn, it looked like you had something to add, and it may have disappeared, but I just wanted to give you a minute if you did.
I feel like along those lines that this role of midwife that we still both are in a sense, right? Like we will always have that hat. I feel like right now it is about sort of gathering this newer perspective in the ways that are shown to us and sharing that. So, for me, even this miscarriage was like major wisdom and like downloads, honestly, from this soul. And it's continued, it was just a month ago. So it's continued into like sharing with me like what conception even is and how that happens. And it's not at all, of course, what we think. It's not at all what the medical world tells us. And, I had ideas about that or thoughts, but it's like getting that direct information has been really cool. And so I feel like I'll figure out a way to get that together a little better, because I feel like that's something, once I understand it better, that needs to be offered. Because I think in even this like very basic understanding I have at the moment, it is frequency and there are so many choices that are made and there's never blame or shame. It's just a matter of frequency. So just bringing it back to what you said is like, it starts with conception, because that's like the ultimate like sovereign act, is this conception between these three beings. So it's like, if people really understood how that happened, which isn't at all the scientific version,
right,
it wouldn't feel so like outside of ourselves. Like, you know what I mean? Like so mechanical, like this happens and on this day and this, it's like, no, what would it feel like if you had different information and this information resonated with you? Because it won't with everybody. People will think it's crazy. But anyway, that being the basis for a pregnancy and birth is completely different. Right. And it's not like, I know you said conscious conception and I know what you mean. And I also like really dislike that phrase lately.
Me too.
Stop saying that, people, not you, Margo, but it's like, it's gotten this like new age thing where it means like, oh, I prayed for a baby and I went under the new moon and it happened. It's like, no, that's actually not what was meant by any of that.
Yes.
It's so, I think I'm definitely triggered by it too right now. I'm like, stop saying that. And it also doesn't mean you get anything particular out of it.
Yeah.
That's the other part of that. So that's a whole thing. But anyway, I'm just saying that, I totally agree. And I think Margo and I in part are here to do some of that, to bring some of this information and not attend births for a while, because we wouldn't be getting this information and sharing it. I think that's what it feels like I'm here to do right now. And if I go back to attending births, it will be with the people that already have this information or are receptive to it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's been a few moments where I wanted to speak to this too. Like the tension between not actively attending births and also saying, like, calling out how unsustainable midwifery is, and also having a midwifery school. So there is a tension there. Like, for anyone who's listening, like, that is not lost on us, that we're like, this fucking sucks. And then also like, but do you want to be a midwife? Come on down. Like, but the way I think that that's resolved is, like you're saying, Maryn, like by having this break in time, it's allowed both of us to reflect on and like digest the experiences we've had, get new cool insights and inspiration, also tend to these students in a different way than we were able to when we were actively attending births, and also offer up like, hey, like these are some things you need to be thinking about. Because a lot of them, if we were like, hey, don't do it this way, they're going to do it this way anyways. So like we're getting them the information, the support, like the soul support that they need too. And I think that we're also helping prepare them for like whatever is next, whether they like choose to follow in our footsteps the next direction we take or not. But that we are able to more consciously infuse that into the school, and help remind them as they are going along. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example from recently. Maybe you have one, Maryn, but like, I mean, I feel like we've already seen it shift how they're showing up, even in the last year or two.
Yeah, and it's, growing pains it's been that way for us. And I feel like we've never been anything but totally honest with sort of everybody that, when we speak like this, or especially with our students, to where like, yeah, I felt that tension too. And also, it's like a mother in a sense, not that there are children, but this feeling of like, I want you to have it better than I did. And that's how I feel about our students. I'm like, why would we continue carrying this ego torch just to make them feel good about themselves? And to make them think they're gonna, they're martyrs, or they're gonna save people. Like, that stuff needs to die. And I will be the one to say, like, I'm putting the torch down, and if you came to our school to be this other kind of midwife because you were confused, or we confused you, I apologize, but that's not what we're doing going forward, and we want something better for you. So it's like from a place of love, and I know it's been confusing at times, but again, I think it's ultimately the growth that we need.
I'm not in the midwifery school, but from my perspective, your message has been very clear. So no confusing for me. And I 100% agree with this phrasing, conscious conception. It is, we need something new, but no matter how many words I've put together, I haven't found the new. But yeah, I feel like just leaning into this transformative space like you are doing is exactly what we need to do collectively, with the energy around the entire process of welcoming and transitioning souls to and from this realm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am really thankful for the work that you guys are doing, and appreciate your presence and just the full transformative expansion that is happening for you all. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, do you guys have anything going on that you would like to share about that's coming up, or that you would like to welcome people into?
We do have an exciting new project that focuses on some of these things we've been talking about.
Okay.
So some of these like sort of mystery wisdom teachings, and it's not just us. There are at least 14 other women that have contributed their wisdom. So that will be out in the world probably soon, in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. And along the lines of the school, we are in transition, and things will be, sort of recreated in the new year. But before that, we'll probably take one more cohort of students that, wants what we've made in the way that we've made it, and, doesn't want to wait for the TBD of when the new thing will be out.
Super exciting. Yeah.
We're also always enrolling in our Sacred Sister training for people who are looking to attend beautiful births in that way as well.
Yes. Yes. Doula work is super essential. It is part of the support for the realm of birth. Yes. So, well, I am super excited that I got to share with you guys, and I'm really excited for the work that you are doing. And I just want to say thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah. As you may have listened in the last episode, I shared about how I was planning to sing directly to my guests on the show. As exciting as that is, I absolutely forgot that I was going to do that this last recording that I did with Maryn and Margo. So hopefully they will still get to hear this song, and if not, you all get to hear it. And I am so excited to once again finish this podcast out with some deep stirrings that were brought forth in light of these conversations. So, leaning into the new, leaning into the unfolding of love all around us. This perfect iteration of releasing the old that does not serve. We're here for the new, the relationships of love, and pure sacred knowing, unfolding for you and me. And shake off what does not serve us and lean into the new. We're dreaming, dreaming something wonderful as we birth the new dimension of love unfolding in you